What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Medium Large Sports Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined this morning by Lance Brozdowski, pitching analyst, helps out with the Cubs broadcast occasionally on MLB Network. So, Lance, a few weeks before the Cubs and the Dodgers start reporting and getting ready for Japan, are we ready for baseball to be back already?
I'm ready. Yeah, this is a little earlier of a start, so it feels like there was absolutely no off season. But it only takes me usually a month and a half to 2 months to really reset and be ready. So
Yeah,
I feel like some people are like, man, I need that whole off season. I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, you
yeah.
give me like November, December, and like January. I'm like, let's go. So I hope you feel the same.
I'm with you. I'm with you. And we are fortunate because the teams that we sort of cover get to start earlier than everybody else. So we've got that going for us. But I'm excited to have you because obviously the Dodgers have been active in the pitching market this offseason, signing arguably the top starting pitcher in Blake Snell, arguably the top relief pitcher in Tanner Scott, and a guy in Kirby Yates that kind of came out of nowhere as well. And so before we get into individual, and Roki Sasaki, by the way, the top international free
No
agent,
big
maybe.
deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. How could I forget about him? Um, but before we get into kind of individual guys themselves, as I'm looking at the scouting stuff, and I was talking to you right before we hopped on, as I look at the last three, or excuse me, Snell, Scott, and Yates, those three who we have major league data on, there's an interesting profile that I'm seeing on all three of those, which is absolutely elite swing and miss, whiff, strikeout rate, absolutely elite, limiting of hard contact, and also one of the worst walk rates in all of Major League Baseball. Like if you look at the Savant page where dark red is good and dark blue is bad, there's a lot of dark red and there's always one little speckle of dark blue. And it's the walk rate for all three of these guys. And so my question to you is this a philosophical shift, do you think, from the Dodgers, or this is just who happened to be available and the guys they just happen to like?
I'm gonna go with a combination of both. I thought this was a great question because I think I've always viewed the Dodgers as a team that is pretty count leverage based. I made a video early last year on my YouTube channel. Shout out my YouTube channel. Check it out. Just search my name, it should pop up. That talked about how the Dodgers have a very odd philosophy in where they throw their four seam fastballs. And a lot of people on the analytics side are like, those got to be elevated. And it's like, I don't know here. When a really sharp organization in baseball is doing something,
Yeah.
I think it's a great opportunity to like introspect and consider why exactly they're doing it. And my primary reasons there were and this is sourced from talking to people in the Dodgers org and also other organizations, basically two paths. One is to get count leverage. They may think that there's a greater probability of a strike in, say, 1-1 and 0 situations, these even counts that you got to win, by going away where your natural miss is kind of going to be back into the zone as opposed to up, where if you still have that same natural up away miss, it's going to end up above the zone and not be a strike. And the other angle is to disguise the sliders they throw. Dodgers generally, especially in their starting rotation, throw a lot of short sliders as opposed to big sweepers. I think they had one of the lowest sweeper rates in baseball over the last 2 years in the first 5 innings, which is kind of my proxy to say these are their starter weapons. So those are the two angles on it. So going from those angles, I would say it has to do with one of those things. Like that is their rooted philosophy that I don't think they'd stray from. With the addition of these guys, I had to kind of, I don't know. I still think that is a general philosophy of theirs. I will say in Snell's case, I think that is just a very good starting pitcher. And I know I've talked on this channel, other channels, about how Snell's walk rate is deceptive. What he
Yeah.
does is just not increase forcing fastball usage as he falls behind in the count. Generally, a lot of guys do that because they don't want to walk a guy. God forbid you walk someone. Snell is like, I'm not gonna throw you my worst pitch to barrel. Like
Yeah.
I'm just not gonna do that. I'd rather put you on base. I'm comfortable with guys on base. Therefore, I will throw you all my junk. If you don't chase, that's fine. You're gonna go to first and I'm gonna straight out the next guy. That's his philosophy. Now, the interesting element on the bullpen pieces, particularly picking up two guys that generally have, let's say, elevated walk rates for relievers in Scott and Yates, is that last year the Dodgers had one of the worst barrel rates in their bullpen specifically. Starting pitcher was more average, but their barrel rate was second highest in baseball at 8.6%. It was basically tied with the Toronto Blue Jays. So I wonder whether the angle for them in late game situations is Scott is the best reliever on the market. Let's just get him so that he doesn't do this again to Otani in
Yeah.
the postseason because Otani got absolutely hammered by him. Maybe that's a fun angle on it, the galaxy brain conspiracy angle. The other angle is he just doesn't allow barrels. I think his barrel rate is under 5%, which is well below average even for a reliever. The average reliever barrel rate is just a little bit under that of a starter. So maybe that is the angle on Scott and Yates, where it's like, hey, we gave up too many late game barrels relative to the league. So let's pick up some guys that are barrel limiters as opposed to strike, get ahead, etc. types, and pull down the probability that teams can make comebacks against us late in the game. That is my guess right now. It's kind of half baked, but that seems to be the most logical approach, in my opinion. Combination of just the best players, but also fitting the idea of
Yeah.
not giving teams a chance late in games to come back with big swings.
Well, and it was your stuff on Snell that I joked with you has kind of changed the way I think about walk rates. Not to say that walks are good, but in the case of somebody like Blake Snell, as you said, who would much rather walk a guy than leave something middle for somebody to crush. And then again, I look at Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates, who the profiles are similar. To your point, it might be philosophically a bullpen thing versus starter thing, and they all happen to look the same this year. But it is just interesting to me because I've, in my mind, think overrated how bad a bad walk rate can be if you're limiting hard contact and getting as much swing and miss as both of these guys. So I imagine for Dodgers fans, it's possible that all of their walk rates get better coming over to the Dodgers, and maybe there's a tweak that the Dodgers make to improve. Or maybe Dodgers fans are just going to have to get used to some more walks, a little bit more stress with guys on the base pass, but just trusting that if they continue being, I mean, Kirby Yates had like the lowest expected batting average, the lowest expected ERA, tied with Mason Miller at the top in all of Major League Baseball. Tanner Scott had the lowest average exit velocity of any pitcher in Major League Baseball, and we know what Blake Snell does from a swing and miss strikeout rate. So maybe as fans, we've just got to get more used to a little bit more traffic on the bases, but not a lot of sort of hits that cash those runners in.
I think a lot of old school people would just say, I want relievers that don't walk anybody. And that's one of those things that I wonder whether teams are like creating a litmus test on, where it's like, I don't necessarily know if that's actually the best way to approach things, because if you're not walking people, you're in zone more. And what loses you games late is probably big swings. I don't think it's like, it's so hard to string together like two singles and a double to score a run or two, you know? I think that a lot of teams are probably like big game hunting late in games, where it's like, let me just get up the guy, the Yordan Alvarez type with the big barrel rate, or Ohtani. Let me get Ohtani up late and just let him swing and like really swing this game in one direction. And it seems to me like there's a chance the Dodgers are just trying to prevent that from happening against them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into some individual guys here. Let's start with Roki Sasaki, the kid coming over from Japan. We know all the hype that he comes with. You have a great video up on your channel. You mentioned it. Search for Lance Broz, and you can find it. Give me like what's your scouting report? Obviously, there's some factors. One is we don't have a ton of like StatCast type data because of where he's pitched, other than the World Baseball Classic, which I think was 2 appearances. And secondly, there is a different baseball that they use in the NPB versus Major League Baseball. So give me kind of the report on Sasaki, and then how the baseball in particular might change some things.
Yeah, I mean, this dude is one of the most storied phenom Japanese pitchers of the last couple of years. It's just that he doesn't have the workload and track record that, say, a Yamamoto did or an Imanaga did coming over, where you're not as like confident this guy's just going to post like a sub 2 walks per 9 and an 11 plus strikeout per 9, and it's like, this guy's crazy. 2.5 ERA as a starter, and even though he's only thrown 120 innings, so I'm hesitant to critique him because the deal is so good. It just doesn't matter what the role is. And this is the thing that I brought up in 2 of the videos I did. The first one was just like, let's look through his StatCast data from NPB, which I got access to. And I made some adjustments there to try to guess what it could be in MLB. In 2023 in the WBC, he had he looked unbelievable. Like that guy, it's almost unfathomable some of the numbers he was able to put together in terms of his shapes and swing and miss and everything that he showed. And he continued to do that in the NPB season. I believe he went down with an oblique strain that year. And then 2024, you saw some regression. And he's come over since then. And again, he ran into some injuries. There was like arm fatigue or something they called it. I don't necessarily know what it was. And the injury thing is real. Like, there's been reporting that this guy asked, like, his first thing to teams was like, my velo was down, which it was down about 2 to 3 ticks last year from 2023. He was sitting 99 in NPB, and he sat 100 at the WBC. He sat 97 in 2024. His pitch was like, figure out what's wrong. Like, tell me what's wrong, you know? And I talked to some organizations that pitched him, and, you know, I think a lot of teams kind of sandbagged the Dodgers here because they had a lot of starters on the injury list. So if you're Sasaki looking at an organization, like the Dodgers are the best from a pitching development standpoint, but they also got a lot of guys injured. So if your goal is to not get injured, perhaps there's maybe a better org to go to than the Dodgers. But if your goal is just to get better in an indefinite period of time, it's probably the Dodgers. So listen, I think the main thing from, again, talking to some organizations that were examining him and in the process, he started cutting everything in 2024 compared to 2023. What happened here was the splitter started to become this really crazy gyro split thing that just took off. Like that was the thing that was like, okay, you're cutting the ball more. This thing is now super unique and we love it. The fastball lost shape and the slider picked up sweep, but it lost too much velocity. You have to think of like movement in relation to velocity. So fastball slider regression, I'd say the splitter jumped up in 2024, and this led to some of the issues that he had. So the big thing is like, okay, what happened to the fastball shape? Was it something he was doing in his body that could be corrected to get him back to 2023? I think even if he sits 97, 98 as opposed to the 99, 100, if the shape is back to where it was in 23, that'll be a better pitch. But the angles in talking again to people about this is like, the one angle you could go is similar to what they did with Yamamoto, where he's not going to have any issues versus left-handed hitters. Do you take the approach of kind of mixing righties to death? You give him a sinker, you give him, a change of slider, you maybe throw in a cutter, you have him throw the curveball more. It's just everything. It's just like, we're kind of going to kill you by numbers here. And then lefties is just like 60% splitter, unhittable pitch. The other angle that I think is also in the realm of probability here is just, you're a 3-pitch guy. We're going to rip the heck out of that slider. That thing went from like 87 down to 83 and 24 miles per hour. And I think they're going to push that thing 90 plus, like 91, 92, change the grip, and just be like, rip it. Like you're going fastball wise, slider away, and you are ripping that thing. That thing's going to be 91 plus. If you're sitting 97, there's no way that pitch can be sub 90. And then your split's insane. You're throwing fastball, and that's literally it. It's like, that is it. You're focusing on those 3 pitches. So I'm fascinated to see which approach they take. They gave Yamamoto about a month before, in May of last year, they started introducing other pitches. You saw that new sinker, you saw the slider thing he was throwing, et cetera. He already had a cutter and a curveball, so his mix was more developed. But I'm fascinated to see what the Dodgers do. I would say this is like a long-term signing to me. I don't think he's going to have the impact Yamamoto had immediately. If he runs into trouble for the first 2 months of the season, I will not be surprised at all. You're betting on like the raw talent here. And maybe he runs into an injury. I think a lot of teams are baking in that he pops in the next however many years because he throws so hard. We've just seen that continually in baseball. So I love him because of how valuable he is from a cost perspective here. But it's incredible that he went to the Dodgers, because I was like, man, I think I'd fade him if he went to some other organizations where it's just like, I don't think he's going to piece it together for the next couple of years. But I don't know. The thing that I will say, I'm fascinated your thoughts here from what you may be hearing in the Dodger space is like, is there a chance in 4 years that it's Sasaki and Ohtani closing games 8-9 for the Dodgers, and they both convert to relievers? Because I think it's in the realm of probability. Sasaki like just can't figure out the injury stuff and ends up being a reliever, and he's utterly dominant. And you have like Ohtani in the 9th and Sasaki in the 8th, and it's like, holy moly, So I don't know if you've heard that at all. Like I think everyone's like, this guy's a starter, and I would give him the leeway to start too. But I'm talking 4 years down the road. Like if he gets hurt again, he pops. Like I don't know. Like is it in the realm of possibility his body's just not going to be able to hold up? That's a non-zero chance for me.
Totally. Well, and I think the Ohtani one's interesting because obviously as Dodgers fans, we haven't even seen Ohtani start or pitch in any capacity yet. So, but I do think there has been some conversation of like, you saw the offensive performance that he had last year, and it's like, okay, is the offense going to dip once he starts to pitch? And obviously there's injury risk with the pitching side of things that could impact the offensive side of things. And so I definitely don't think over the course of the contract, Ohtani being a reliever is crazy at all. I think it's just, who knows what they're going to do. But I want to circle back to something you said, because you said this last time on our show, which is one of the reasons I like having you on, is you're not a groupthink guy. Like you're not just like, oh, well, this is what everybody else is saying, so I'm going to say it. And I don't want to say that you were like being critical or pushing back in any way, shape, or form. But I think in a way that I think I kind of tend to agree with, you're positing and saying, hey, let's not like just assume this guy's going to be Paul Skeens next season. I think, to your point, this is a long-term signing. They've got him for 6 years. He's only 23 years old. He dealt with some issues last year, injury-wise, velocity-wise, etc. That it's possible in 2025, we're actually not looking at a guy who's going to win Rookie of the Year and a guy who's going to start 20 to 25 games for the Dodgers. It's possible he throws out of the bullpen a little bit. It's possible that the development is a little slower. Like you also mentioned that now that he signs with the Dodgers, maybe you rethink some of those things because it's the Dodgers. But like now that he is a Dodger, and thinking about what you said on our show, a couple of months ago, like how do you sort of mesh those two together? And maybe what are your personal realistic expectations for what you think Sasaki's 2025 looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated to see how he's used. And like, again, I thought there was some chance that he signed in the early window where the Dodgers had a lot of money, because if he's like actually truthful about wanting to become like an excellent player, I would want to be in that organization November 30th. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, get me there right now. Let me spend 2.5 months with this training staff on me every single day. Like, this is something that I know the Cubs have tried to push on some of their guys, especially like Justin Steele, who made a massive jump in innings. He jumped like 70 innings year over year, and everyone's like, oh, you're going to get hurt. And it's like, that dude was in Arizona for an entire offseason,
Yeah.
like there with coaches and trainers. And like, I think most organizations, if they had their way, would have an entire 26-man roster under their purview for an entire offseason, especially on the pitching side specifically, just because it's just so much easier to monitor workload. Like, I think a lot of these guys maybe get plans and just kind of don't. I don't want to say they don't follow them, but like they show up and it's like, oh, okay, you're not as forward as we wanted you to be because I ran into this injury here. Oh, I took 5 days off. I went on vacation or something like that, and I didn't get throwing in. I'm sorry. Like that slows you down, and I think that a lot of orgs are trying to push for more like, I want to be on this guy the entire time, to prevent injuries. So going back to the Sasaki side, like, I wonder again, my point in saying that maybe it's a slow start is he there right now? Is he in Arizona? Like, where are we in the program? Like, the Dodgers got to intake what he did. I know he's working with Joe Wolf. I can't imagine he was working with like a stupid trainer,
Right.
But like, you just don't know. Like, I don't know the Dodgers philosophies. I don't necessarily know if like Wolf knew the Dodgers philosophies or Sasaki did, Like, if he was actually still making up his mind, he wouldn't have just, and this would have been colluding as well, but like the Dodgers sent him a throwing program. It was like, hey, we're going to sign you. We'll do it in a late window, but like, get on this program right now. Like, I don't think that happened. So I think there's just a chance you get a little bit of a slow start. I bet he's not starting in Japan. I bet he's more like a relief option, just because I can't imagine a lot of guys are going to be stretched out fully by the time they go to Japan. Steamer projections have him at 140 innings, 3.3 ERA, 32% strikeout rate, 7% walk rate, like 24% strikeout minus walk, which is top 5 in baseball. I'll take the worst on all of that.
Yeah.
And it's just a reality of, again, I think this is a multi-year project. This is like, the Dodgers chase upside philosophically. You see this in the minor leagues. They're not interested in the guy who's a 5. It's completely useless for that organization to develop number 5 starting pitchers. It doesn't make any sense. That organization develops aces. They develop River Ryan. If Nick Frasso pops and never becomes a pitcher, doesn't matter. There's a 2% chance that guy would become a righty version of like Chris Sale. That's all they want. You're taking a shot at all those pieces because you could backfill from the monetary side on all the depth. So that's the Sasaki angle to me, is like, we don't want this guy to be like a 5th starter. Like, he's either an ace or he's a bullpen ace, because we're gonna have 5 other pitchers that are good enough to start in our rotation. So I'll take the under. Like, I think he's maybe like we'll go like 3.6 ERA. I'll give him 120 innings instead of 140. And I think the strikeout rock is fair. I'll take this a little bit low on the strikeout. Like, they got him at like almost 12 strikeouts per nine, would be like one of the tops in baseball. I think he's gonna be good. It's just like, I'm looking at more of like a ramp. Like, this guy in 2 to 3 years is unreal. But right now, I'm not giving him a 3.3 ERA and 3.5 WAR. I'll predict that he doesn't win the Rookie of the Year.
Well, and those projections don't bake in the fact that the Dodgers do not care how good he is in May or June or July.
That's a great point.
Like they 100. When you said 140 innings, I was like, I just don't see a world. I don't see a world where he throws 140 innings, and I'm not projecting an injury. I just don't think the Dodgers, with any of these guys, care what they look like for the first 3 or 4 months of the season. Is he available, and is he peaking in September, October, November? And that's going to kind of be the key with a guy like Sasaki. So
I'm looking right now. So they had last 2 seasons, they had 3 starters over 130, and Stone got over 140, but it was by 0.1 inning last year.
And then he got hurt.
Yeah, in 2023, Kershaw had 131. And then you go back to like 21, 22, you got a couple guys over 170. But the last couple of years, like, they're pushing towards like none of these guys. Like, we just don't believe philosophically that these guys need to throw 140. We'll have 7 guys throw 130 to get through all this. And then postseason comes, you're peaking, etc. I think that's really what their strategy is.
Totally. Yeah. And again, they're going to be running a 6-man rotation all season as well. And so even if you're healthy and make every single start all the way through the season, like, I think you're probably maxing out at like 160 to 170. And again, I just can't imagine a world where Roki Sasaki starts on the open, the week of Major League Baseball opening in the United States. I can't imagine he makes a start that week and then does not miss a start at any point throughout the season, which is essentially where we would need to get to. Let's shift gears. Let's talk Tanner Scott. This is a guy that the Dodgers reportedly have been fascinated by for years and years and years. They finally go and get their guy. The the Cubs, who you're connected to, were the other team in on him. It's too bad, Lance, that the owner of the Cubs can't afford guys like Tanner Scott. They're just trying to break even over there. I don't know how much you could say, so I'll just leave it at that. But I want to ask you two questions on Tanner Scott. One is like kind of the scouting report. This is the guy the last 2 years that's become one of the best relievers in baseball after a handful of years where he was kind of average. And the second thing is just philosophically, I'm curious, the idea of paying a reliever this amount of money for 4 years through like his 34th or 35th birthday. I forget exactly where his birthday falls. Like, are you somebody that subscribes to that type of roster building? Is Tanner Scott an exception? Kind of how do you do that? So scouting report and then a contract.
Yeah, fastball slider guy. He's got the fastball trade here is really unique. He's combining a low release height with good extension and vertical movement, which is kind of, again, like the modern fastball philosophy. It's like, we don't want Justin Verlander, huge over the top vertical movement. We kind of want like the Brian Wu or Emmett Sheehan to some extent has this, where it's like decent extension in riding the ball from a low slot, so it creates a flat approach to combat these more vertical swings like a Otani or Freddie Freeman that create a ton of barrels. And he does this really well, and he demolishes left-handed hitters. And the slider shape works versus lefties and righties because it's kind of short and tight. Stuff models absolutely love him, which are looking at movement, velocity, release characteristic combinations. They seem basically with 2+ pitches, borderline plus on the fastball. He's really good. Like I struggle to find a better stuff-based reliever in baseball. The byproduct of that, though, is like this guy for the majority of his career had massive walk problems.
Yeah.
This was prior to him working, I believe, at Tread Athletics, which under the tutelage of actually a new Cubs employee, Tyler Zombro, who's now over here working in their front office. But I imagine there was some connection there as to why Scott was so heavily tied to the Cubs, and the Cubs seemed to have made like a pretty strong offer on him.
Yeah.
But the situation, I mean, I don't know, from Cubs perspective, it's like, okay, if the Cubs match the Dodgers offer, I think the Dodgers would have just gone higher, right? Like, you know what I mean? At some point, it's like you give up because you don't know where the ceiling is for the Dodgers in terms of paying him. But yeah, I mean, it's a really wacky everything he does. Like, it's just a really unique fastball, and it's tough to do anything with it. It's really tough to barrel him. He's going to walk some guys. I don't really think it matters. He's a huge weapon for me in the postseason, too. That's why I wanted him on the Cubs so much. I just thought the Cubs have this righty reliever who throws a bunch of sweepers. And I really thought it'd be an awesome contrast with Scott, like both kind of lower slot guys creating different shapes, left, right. You could really play around with like back end situations. You could kind of game plan both those guys split save opportunities, in the Cubs, or Scott probably gets more, but like, I don't know, I'd maybe want to use him in the 7th and 8th if you had a pocket of lefties coming up. And I think that, again, like the Dodgers to some extent are building like the super bullpen to combat any possible scenario they run into in the playoffs, where it's like, okay, you got 3 weird hitters up. We have 3 different options we can go after with these guys. And, we're going to replace you in game 5. We'll have the same scenario come up. We'll use another one of these guys who is equally as good in that spot. So you're not getting the decay of seeing a reliever over and over and running into that penalty of like, I've seen Tanner Scott 3 times in this series. It's like, okay, the team has seen him 3 times, but we actually matched him up differently 2 or 3 other times. So like, this is only the 2nd time this hitter's seen him. So we're not going to run into these 3rd time through penalties that can exist in a series perspective. So if the Dodgers' goal is to win World Series, which it obviously is, then Scott is a beautiful chess piece to have in that. But he's a very simple pitcher. I think there's some speculation about adding another pitch. I don't think it's necessary. I think you just riff fastball slider. Walk rates have come down a bit for him over the last couple of years. If they can somehow get him in zone more, this guy's going to have, his 2023 was like really, really good. And he had a great year last year. He just walked some more guys, but I don't know if they can mix together what they got in 23, 24. This guy's definitely worth $18 million a year. I think that's an absolute slam dunk for leverage relief, especially in the market now. Like we're seeing like Claire get 10 mil and something like Yates. Is that contract out? That's probably 12 mil plus, I would bet.
Yeah, as we record today, it hasn't been reported, but the numbers that I heard on kind of where that number might be were definitely lower. Obviously, he's going to be 38. We'll talk about him in a second, but yeah, to your point, when I look at it's kind of like the Blake Snell contract. Think about whatever you want about the Snell number, but when you see what other guys around him are getting, guaranteed money in the form of like Max Fried, Corbin Burns, and my personal view was I liked Snell better than both of those guys, and the fact that obviously deferrals included as well, but we're talking $30 to $40 million less guaranteed for Blake Snell than for Fried and Burns, who both went over 200. Like, I think relative to some of the other numbers that have come out, all those contracts have kind of quote unquote aged well, I would say.
Yeah, this offseason's pushed down the market for first baseman in like these big power bats. Like Santander not eclipsing 100 is crazy, $100 million in total value. And you've seen like reliever market really push. Like I think that Yates contract's gonna be over 12 million for 1 year, I would bet. you know, like some of these other guys getting like 10 to 11 million. Like Hoffman, terrible medicals, he still gets 11 million. Like I really like Hoffman a lot, and like he doesn't think that shoulder's the problem, but like the reliever market's getting juiced up. So like I don't hate that you get the top end guy for 18. That's less than the Hater contract, right? The Hater contract was more. It's like
Yeah,
5 for 120-ish or something like that window. I want to say 115, whatever it was.
sounds
So
right.
like I mean Hater, that's not aging well, and like sure maybe the Scott contract doesn't age well, but again, like you're trying to win in the next 2 years. Like I'm confident this guy's gonna be good next year. Slightly less confident he'll be good in the subsequent seasons. But like if he posts like a 3 WAR reliever season, which is in the realm of probability here, he pays off 50% of the contract in 1 year. And
Yeah.
that's the approach. Again, they're chasing upside.
Yeah, and the Dodgers bullpen, I mean, you think about the back with Evan Phillips, Michael Kopech, Blake Trinan, Tanner Scott, Alex Vesia, Kirby Yates. It's those 6, and again, some people are going to think like Alex Vesia, the numbers he put up last year. And by the way, you might have to, I might ask you to do a video on this because I'm looking at Kopech, 93rd percentile strikeout rate, 7th percentile walk rate. Alex Vesia, basically the exact same 95th percentile strikeout rate, 5th percentile walk rate. So when you look at the back of the
Yeah, I
bullpen,
might have to do something on
Trinan
this.
and Evan
Yeah.
Phillips might be the exceptions, but they've all got guys who the profile seems to be, and again, and maybe this is Vesia doesn't have command control as much as some of these other guys, or maybe the Dodgers are saying, we don't care. Like, we don't care if you miss high, just don't miss down and down. So, okay, before we go, let's talk Kirby Yates. Again, we're recording this like an hour and a half after the news was reported. He wasn't on our bingo card to talk about today, and yet the Dodgers not done yet. Kirby Yates going to be 38 at the end of March. The savant number that I saw floating around social media that got me most excited was, as I said earlier, I think he was 100th percentile in expected batting average and expected slugging percentage, on par with Mason Miller, who we all know what we believe about Mason Miller. So yes, 37, 38, but he doesn't seem to be slowing down at this point, Lance.
I think there's a chance this last season was the best season of his, not the best season of his career, but like the best season he will have for the rest of his career is probably the way to phrase it. But I think that's okay for the most part because the splitter is just incredible pitch. I imagine that's really what the Dodgers are buying overall. He made like a subtle fastball adjustment I was looking at where I think it was versus right-handed hitters specifically. He was kind of like targeting more up, and then this was lefties. He's targeting like up in. He was like pounding that thing up in, especially when he fell behind in the count. This was his main problem last couple of years with left-handed hitters. And what he did was kind of like move that fastball down away and started like popping some away, which is again really in line with the Dodger philosophy of like we don't want him to elevate all the time. We think there's some philosophical advantages in not elevating and setting up other pitches. My speculation is that away fastball helped his splitter kind of like visually disguise itself from a line perspective. Like you think of like if the trajectories are here and here, they're less masked than if you move one of them down. So from like a visual difference perspective, it might have been a little bit harder to pick up the split. And this, I think, really was his unlock because he's always been pretty good versus righties overall. The stuff doesn't grade out amazing, but again, some of the barrel limiting features that he's had, especially over the last like couple years here. Well, like 2022 he was injured, so it doesn't really count. But like he had an 11% barrel rate in 2023. That cut down to a 4% barrel rate.
Yeah.
That is like a dramatic drop. And even if that averages back out, say it averages out to 6, again, we talked in the beginning of this video, like they had a ton of barrels in the pen, almost 9%. So if you can add in a couple guys like Scott Yates that are in that window where it's below average barrel rate, and you're confident in those statistics, underlying statistics projecting out in the subsequent season here in 2025, then I'm as confident as they are in terms of him being productive. Again, I just think like those names you mentioned, it's just a matchup nightmare in terms of being able to like match these guys up specifically with hitters that struggle against what they do because they all do things like subtly different. I bet like Kopech is like velo slider, so if like you struggle versus velo, we're gonna have him eat up the bottom of the lineup. Scott is the lefty killer. Vesia is like your early game lefty killer, where like he's a vert fastball, but he's higher slot. That's a really unique release. Evan Phillips is kind of more of a righty killer, like cutter slider off that. You just have like a lot of really good weapons that you can mix and match with. And I just think it's going to be really frustrating for teams to face off against them in series. So, congrats on the 2025 World Series, I guess.
No, don't say that. Don't say that, Lance. I do want to, because you, again, what I like is your perspective as somebody who's not like just eating, sleeping, breathing the Dodgers world, like so many of the people that we get the privilege of talking to and folks like us, to be perfectly honest. And so I did want to end with, as we, on the heels of Snell, Sasaki, Scott Yates, etc. From your perspective, like as somebody who's working for a company that's covering the Cubs and somebody who just follows baseball at a bigger level, like, what do you actually make of what the Dodgers have done this offseason? And like, I'm not specifically asking like is this bad for baseball kind of a question, but I'm just curious how you sort of process and internalize the scope of what the Dodgers have done really over the last 13, 14 months.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see. I feel like I need to read up on more on this, but I've heard some like floated ideas in other sports of like more groups purchasing teams. Like there's a group that owns the Dodgers and like funds, et cetera. Like, again, I'm not like a business mogul person. I don't fully understand this stuff. But my understanding is like a lot of teams in baseball and other sports are owned by families, like smaller groups. Like you see this a lot on the south side of Chicago where like Reinsdorf doesn't really want to spend a lot of money on a variety of things. And it's like, cool, it's family owned, it's family operated. Like this is partially the reason why the Bears have been terrible in Chicago for however many years. And I think what you might start to see is like, in order to compete with the Dodgers, you need more money. So I wonder this is a longer term, I think it's like 5 to 10 years, whether what happens in a lot of these situations is like you either get a Cohen style person who comes in, or Rubenstein. We'll see if the Orioles actually end up spending money at any point. But you have these big guys come in who are like, no limitations payroll, blow it away, know? And then on the other hand, some of these other families maybe sell, and it goes to a fund such that there is more aggression in terms of being competitive and tolerance for going over the luxury tax. I really think that to me right now, just gut instinctually as I ask this question, is like what the implication of this is. It's just you have to. It's crazy, but like there's going to be people who have to end up selling their team because it's just not feasible to compete. Right. And if you don't want to inject the money to compete, then like I don't see it as like a viable business proposition for a lot of these smaller market teams. It's unfortunate, but it kind of is what it is. You really just need a Cohen style person to come in here and go, boom, here you go over luxury tax. So I don't care, 80 million over, it doesn't matter to me. Like I want to win. And that's the only way you're going to re-level out the playing field. So the angle of like, this is bad for baseball. I don't, short term, sure. Like they're the favorite. I think everybody loves a villain. So I doubt that it's bad for baseball overall. Like if a team beats the Dodgers in the playoffs now, like everybody's gonna love that team. Like villains sell, man. Like everybody's gonna be watching this team. Like I get home from these Central Time games in the Midwest here, and like I put on the Dodgers. Like it's a fun team. I imagine a lot of people are doing the same thing. So I don't think it's bad for baseball. I think it's potentially like villainous in the short term, and then in the long term, it might be really good. Where you have some CBA stuff renegotiating, the luxury tax jumps a ton. Maybe a lot of these teams figure out the direct-to-consumer revenue on the television side to match the offers in monetary value they've gotten in the past. Or maybe teams see, like the Dodgers, where it's like, we actually think this international market is really how we're going to get a lot of this money back. So like we're going to hammer that and pick up all these Japanese guys. And I think there's so many more variables here that we got to consider than just like the Dodgers paid a lot of money for guys, boo-hoo. It's like, okay, like the end goal here in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years is that I think a lot more teams are going to be owned by these groups that will have more tolerance to absolutely blow out of the water the current luxury tax numbers we're seeing. So that's what I got. I don't have much beyond that. I definitely have to think about it more. If anyone is on like the business side and understands this stuff, I'm fascinated to hear your thoughts in the comments, but that's kind of where my brain is going right now.
Yeah. Well, and the thing I just keep saying is the baseball playoffs are still the same format that they've been for the last few years, which does not designed to allow a team like the Dodgers to just coast their way to a World Series. No. It doesn't matter how much better you are than the team you are playing. If you in the first round, it's still going to be a 5-game series. So like, I think it's safe to assume the Dodgers probably going to avoid that wild card situation. It's still a 5-game series. And the Dodgers were down 2-1 last year in that series. And then it's a 7-game and a 7-game. And anything can happen in the sport of baseball where one swing or one pitch can totally change the trajectory. So do I think the Dodgers are going to be like pushing for one of the highest win totals in regular season history? Potentially / probably but do I think that like their odds of winning the World Series this year is going to be dramatically better than last year? I mean, according to Vegas, they will, but actual realistic probability, like maybe marginally. I mean, we joked on our show, like signing Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates, that's awesome. It increased their odds of winning a World Series by like 0.05%, maybe. You know what I'm saying?
It can't go much higher.
It's such a hard thing anyway.
You can't handicap it any higher, especially in the sport of baseball where like, what do they have that old stat where it's like you need 100 and whatever? No, it's like a 40-something game series to get to the better team winning over whatever percent of the time. I'm misrepresenting the statistic here, but in all the other sports, it's smaller. So to your point, like the data backs up the fact that like you have a lot of randomness in baseball. And I really think that what you might run into with the Dodgers is like you get past that 5-game set, then you're fine because you shrink some of that variance by going to 7 games. But that might be their bugaboo is like getting knocked in that 5-game series. You just run into a team that I don't know who that team could be, but just dominates for a couple just has a gem from a Dylan Cease type, and then it goes to 5, and then they have Dylan Cease again, and then you only need to win one more of those games. It's like you could run into some weird scenarios there where you just get bounced because of it. But that's the beauty of the sport, man. Like,
Yep.
I don't know. I still think some of these other sports are really struggling with the regular seasons of their sports, and I think a lot of people think baseball schedules should probably be shortened slightly or whatever. But I think the baseball regular season still has some relevance.
Yeah.
And I think that the schlag of it and how long it is one thing that is attractive to a lot of people. It's consistent. It's always there, you know? And I like that about the sport. So
yeah, I'm with you. That is Lance Brozdowski. Again, you can find him at Lance Bros on YouTube, on social media. Any videos in particular you want to plug real quick?
Yeah, I mean, I got some Dodgers stuff. If you just search Dodgers in my channel, I've made probably 3-4 videos on them. Recent stuff, I've been just poking around on some breakouts. But yeah, I'm gonna get going into this season. You piqued my interest on this like Dodgers super bullpen, but not in the way you think it's a super bullpen. So I'm gonna maybe pull some more analysis on like how this matchup stuff works. But the barrel angle is fun in terms of like them walking guys, but not allowing barrels.
Yeah.
I like it. So maybe I'll do something on that in the next couple of weeks.
I love it. Well, Lance, we appreciate it as always. Folks, thanks for watching. Again, this is DodgerHeads presented by DodgerBlue.com. If you're new, go ahead, subscribe, ring the notification bell down below. We'd greatly appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. As always, go Dodgers.